Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I have your attention? Can you please be seated? Good evening, everyone. I'm expecting you to respond to me with a good evening or a hi or anything that you'd like to start with. So good evening. My name is Lisa and I'm from Shore. I will be your host for today. And I would like to start by thanking you for making the time to be here with us. We're thrilled to be launching this exciting new community for CHROs, Total Rewards enthusiasts and practitioners. We strongly believe in the quote by Simon Sinek, a community is a group of people who agree to grow together, which highlights the importance of learning and collaboration in a community. And this is the exact reason why we are here today, to celebrate the idea of fostering connection and growing together. Saying that, it is my pleasure to introduce Anurag Dixit, the co-founder and CEO of Shore. He will be our keynote speaker for this evening. So without further ado, can you please give me applause and help me by welcoming Anurag to the stage. And he will be discussing more about the community, community insider, and compensation insider.
So firstly, thank you so much for being here today and being a part of the launch of Compensation Insider. I'll start by telling why are we doing this at the first place. So fundamentally, we believe that communities will completely transform the way businesses are built. And Compensation Insider will be one such place that will help us completely redefine how we make compensation decisions. We did not want to miss being a part of this group. We did not want to miss being around you, to learn from you, and then build alongside you. Now, when we first started building real-time compensation benchmarks, it was all of us who came together because we fundamentally believed that just a one-time report was not enough. We believed that we needed a better solution than just an outdated Excel sheet that was built on old data set. We believed that we need a better visualization than an Excel sheet that made no sense for a startup to consume. And hence, when we started speaking to more and more people around compensation benchmarking, we realized that the biggest reason why so less startups participate in compensation benchmarking exercise is that the data quality is pretty bad. And the second most important or second most mentioned reason was that it is too costly. And this is the reason why on an annual basis, just 25 to 30 startups participate in this exercise which is being run by consulting firms. Just 25 to 30. No wonder the data is bad. Because everybody feels it is costly, no one participates. Because no one participates, the data quality is bad. Which is why when we started building this, we had a goal in mind that the first time we launch compensation benchmarks, we should have at least 50 to 60 participants. And we wanted to reduce any artificial bottlenecks that could be there that could hinder us from achieving that. Which is why we kept this free of cost. And we did not just get to 60, we got more than 200 funded startups who participated in this, making this the largest database of funded startups compensation benchmarks. But that was not all. As we started crunching more and more data, we realized that there is so much more that we can give back than just the benchmarks. We can give trends. We can give more insights into what is happening. I mean, how do I share with all of you that in the function of product, salaries have gone down by 7% in the last quarter as compared to the first 3 quarters of previous year. And there is more to this, right? There's so much more insights, so much more good practices that are sitting in silos in different teams, which called for a common place where all of this can be synthesized, all of this can be shared, so that together we can empower each other with our knowledge and expertise so that compensation decisions can be made better. And not just that, Compensation Insider will also be a place where you can get answers to all the questions that you have. Your questions will be answered by the best people in the business. It will be a place where you can find all the resources that you would need to make compensation decisions. And above all, it will be a place where we will leverage your learnings, your insights, your problems and the suggestions to your problems to build a global total rewards platform that can solve the biggest problem of the world around compensation, pay disparities. With that, I would like you to introduce, I'd like to introduce you to Sarita, who will be the community manager to whom you can reach out to for any questions related to how to get into the community and what all we have to offer. We have kept this community invite only for now, and we are monitoring each and every member who gets in the community. So that is all from my side. I hope we have a lovely evening together. And this is not the only evening that we'll be having together. We'll have many more of these. So thank you so much, everybody. Welcome again.
Thank you, Anurag, for enlightening us about compensation inside our community. We now move on to our panel discussion on how to transform total reward policies in the current economic downturn. And for this, we are honored to have with us today 4 respected experts in the field of total rewards: Subeer Bakshi, Babu Vittal, Romita Mukerjee, and Satish KV. Can I have a round of applause for them, please? I'll quickly introduce you to them, and I'd request, as I introduce, if you could please join me on the dais. So first, I'd like to introduce Subeer Bakshi. Subeer is the head of talent strategy at Payphone with over 20 years of experience in talent management. Subeer has a proven track record of building high-performance teams and shaping organization culture. Prior to joining Payphone, Subeer held leadership roles at companies like Cognizant and Mercer. Welcome to the panel, Subeer. Next, we have Babu Vittal. He is the people and culture leader for ULA. With over 2 decades of experience in human resource field, Babu has a strong background in talent development, management strategies. Before joining ULA, Babu held senior HR positions at a number of companies, including Reliance and Flipkart. We're glad to have you here, Babu. All right. Now we have Romita Mukerjee, the global head at Whatfix. With over 15 years of experience in the HR industry, Romita has developed an expertise in talent management and organizational design. She has worked with several global organizations, including Samsung and Boston Consulting Group. Welcome to the panel, Romita. All right, last but not least, we have Satish KV, the co-founder and COO at Sportable. With over 15 years of experience in technology industry, Satish has previously worked in companies like Flipkart and AOL. Satish comes with an in-depth experience in multiple functional areas like ESOP plan design and framework, reward strategy and design. We're so happy to have you with us, Satish. All right, now that we have everyone on the panel, just a few things. During this panel discussion, our speakers will be sharing their experiences as well as their best practices on how to transform total reward policies in the current economic downturn. They will also be taking questions from the audience in the end. So I know you have a lot of questions. Please keep that at the end. We have a live Q&A session where you can take the opportunity to jot them down. But yeah, so without further ado, let's begin our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizelle. Great. So I'll first introduce as to what this panel discussion is around, so you can take the most of it. So the agenda is that as we are moving probably from an excess demand kind of a market scenario, where it was very tough to hire people, and there were insane salary increases for the past 2 years, to a scenario right now where we are probably at a place where there's excess supply, especially from the startup ecosystem. Plus, this is also a scenario where there possibly could be companies who are setting up GICs in India. Maybe companies who are catering to Indian consumers who are still hiring, which were considered not so cool until now, but maybe now would be the places where people want to shift to. Now, in changing market scenario like this, how does our reward strategy change is what we'll be discussing. So we'll start first with Subeer to understand, in order to tackle this market scenario, in response to this market scenario, do you think there needs a change in the strategy from what it was before to what it is now? Also in context where PhonePe has raised massive funds of late, does that change for you?
Anurag, I actually think that there's a lot that's changing in rewards. One of the things that we've seen very clearly is that variable pay, that was a mainstay of reward programs, as a lever of reward programs, that's gone away. And that's essentially because companies are trying their best to maximize how much money they put in the hands of the employees. And also because the line of sight, the piece rate approach that we had to rewards, that's going away. You know, in most startups, because of technology, digital focus, it's not that you can measure outcomes in an annual basis. So as a consequence, we're seeing there's a lot that's changing, and the focus on long-term incentives, the power of wealth creation that long-term incentives have created means that when you join a company, or the state of the financials in the company, which is different from profits, can determine how much or how well can star talent get paid. So I think we are starting to see changes. We haven't seen the full extent of what those changes will be, but definitely the way that we were doing things in the past will come under a lot of stress.
I have a follow-on question to that. You talked about the long-term incentives. I don't think that we'll be seeing a lot of liquidity programs in the future, right? That changes the perception of talent with respect to probably how this was being perceived, say, an year back to what it is now. Do you think people, the talent, will still buy to long-term incentives that the startups offer?
Startups offering long-term incentives will still be valuable. Companies pretending to be startups will no longer get this. Amazon still talks about day one. Amazon's one of the largest retailers in the world. They still try and continue an attitude about startups, and it's admirable. A lot of the literature of startups is being written by Amazon. Two Pizza team leader. We are talking about so much of what we talk about approaches in startups is shaped by Amazon. But Amazon is not a startup anymore. Amazon will probably have issues about companies like Amazon. But when we talk about startups that are starting out with 20 people, 30 people, I don't think that will be an issue for any of those companies. But that's just my view, and I'm happy to hear other people.
Got it. So, Babu, you have a company that runs on 2 different countries, right? I'm sure the way rewards in general are perceived by 2 different countries would be different, and I'm sure you would have a reward policy that is different to attract talent, right? You've scaled your engineering team here in India. What is your take on how will reward philosophy change in the given economic downturn?
I mean, it will change for good. The first fundamental goal is not to pay, right? So how long can you push by not paying the employee? I hope nobody from my organization is here, right? So that's the first fundamental philosophy. Looking at it, how much money you have on the bank is something what an investor is so keen to look at, right? I'm just starting looking at the basic principles. Number 2, how long a runway you can show to the organization, right? Or to the investors. Number 3, in this situation, what sort of a promise you can deliver to the employee, right? So long-term incentives come into play. We may look at doing 1 or 2 events which will fulfill the promise. Could be a liquidation event also. I disagree that liquidation event may not happen, but it will definitely happen. But that's just a small token of appreciation or token of promise fulfilled, right? Once an employee starts seeing that, then the longevity can be further moved on. Some of the changes what we see now, which is becoming much more interesting. I work in 2 different geographies. One geography in India where everybody is very vocal. Somebody who's supposed to, real-time example, someone who's supposed to join yesterday, we were not able to make the offer letter on time, which happens always. He's joining today. He says, start paying me from yesterday, right? For him, it's logical. I wasted my day yesterday, hoping that you'll make an offer and join. So that's the Indian geography for you. When I look at the other geography, Indonesia and Southeast Asia, they don't tell you what they feel. They express their discontent, I was just sharing with Subeer, through resignation, right? That's how you get to know how bad they are feeling. Now, how do you manage between these two? Is by continuously showing those smaller promises. But at the end of the day, just to keep it simple, I don't know how you will be able to devise a plan around this, not to pay. Right? That's my answer. I don't know whether you are happy with the answer, but it's clear.
No, I have a follow on to that. So, Babu, you told that you'll be fulfilling your promises to some extent, right? I think there would be a large sector of funded startups who might not even be able to fulfill that small promise, right? What do you suggest to them? How can they still keep up their promise, right? Unlike your organization, who is still in the position to fulfill bits and pieces of promises that they've made, right? What do you suggest to a company who is absolutely not able to?
See, there are other ways, right? I mean, it's the basket. One of the component of the basket is a liquidation program we are talking about. There are other ways in which this can happen. There is one way of saying that I'm not doing anything, but you end up doing something, right? So this is a zero-sum game. When you communicate that I'm not doing something and you end up doing something, what happens is there is a promise which starts developing within the organization. That's something you can do. You can always keep referring to few changes which are happening in the ecosystem. You can talk about some changes which we will do in the long term. Everything is a promise, right? It is very difficult for you to compete. I heard that Cred, if I'm not mistaken, would be doing a very good liquidation program very soon, right? Flipkart obviously is going to do something for people who have left and who are in, right? That's because of the PhonePe sign off and moving away, right? These two promises are going to hit the market, and each and every employee is going to come behind all their current employer and ask about, are you planning to do something, right? What will you be doing? Just pull something out of the basket in terms of a long-term benefit. It could even be in terms of extending your insurance benefit and adding 2 more siblings to it. That's also possible. Figure out something which you can do, but you will have to definitely do something.
Got it. Talking of benefits as a lever to make your employees feel happier or more satisfied with respect to compensation, Romita, I would want to hear your thoughts on how these have changed over the years in the journey that Whatfix has seen. I'm sure when you are early stage, when you're growth stage to what Whatfix is right now, the benefits that you have created for employees would have also gone a transformational journey, right? How can that be used as a lever, and how important it is to use them as a lever in the times right now where we may not have anything else?
Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So I think I'll give a interesting context of what Subeer and what Babu said. See, there would be no time when you can make everyone happy. Let's be very honest to ourselves, and you won't be able to cater to every needs and request and the feedback that you keep coming across. But one thing is very important: just start looking at, or start keeping your eyes and ears open when your employees are giving you feedback, right? And look at some things which is more a mass scale requirement, which is more frequently asked, and look at making that happen. Now, making that happen cannot be like you just promise and you don't deliver, right? You have to make sure that it is tangible, it is there for them. Even if it is small, make that attempt, take that step. What is the most important aspect, and I feel it's not only India but globally, oftentimes organizations do not pay so much of attention in educating their employees about the benefits. That education is extremely important, and it just goes as a text in your offer letters, or it might just go as an information in the policy. How many of us in the HR team are actually doing, let's say an example, a proper awareness about long-term incentives? How many of us are doing that? I think that's the biggest question for all of us. Many of our employees do not even understand how a long-term incentive can derive a wealth. They just still see it's on the paper. They don't see that gets materialized. For them, at times it's not even a matter, it's just a number on their offer letter. So we actually specially thought that, okay, this is an area which we want to educate people on. Benefits, like as simple as, let's say I'll talk about parental benefits, right? In India, it's absolutely relevant, and people understood the value of it only when they experienced COVID, right? Many a times people would actually see a parental insurance which is being offered, but then they would not opt for it. We have a case, like sizable number of cases in our company where people have realized, okay, they have missed the window of enrolling their parents into the insurance and they have come back and asked for it. So how is that happening? Because we are educating people about how important it is with the data, with the story. It's not so much about like you should opt for it, but talk about what kind of situation you can land into if you don't opt for it. So that proactive education is important. Second is exactly the ESOP program and the RSU program. I know what you're saying, like whether the liquidity would happen or not, will you get there, those promised fulfilled? Yes, situation is definitely not that promising, but I think one aspect which will help organization to sustain this promise is focusing on the efficiency part. I think oftentimes what happens is we just continue to remain in the rhythm of just working, but we don't take a pause and relook at some of our roles, right? Some of our roles might be very capsuled. You're not taking over and beyond, you're not relooking at the roles, redefining the roles to get best out of it. Whereas your talent might be absolutely ready, your talent might be looking at something to pivot, but you haven't thought over it because the role has been defined like that. So bringing in an efficiency, bringing in a KPI, key performance indicators at least for each role is extremely important. And I think in the startup community that is extremely, extremely important because that's when you're able to fulfill those promises.
Very true. So while we have heard all the thoughts, Satish, from an organization point of view, now that you have been a practitioner, right, a large part of your career, and you've also advised a lot of unicorns around how to build policies around this. I'm sure you have seen worse already. Now, how do you feel the talent landscape is perceiving all of this? And because you have an inside view into how the talent is perceiving this, what would you suggest in terms of if someone wants to change their reward policy now, what should that focus on?
Yeah, I think even before getting into what should they look at changing, I think so. If you look at what's really happening in the market, right? There's a lot of news about companies rolling back the policies or rolling out something to all of that's happening around, right? I think the first thing in rewards, whether it's this time or any other time, I think it's very, very important to be thinking about what there are three broad components of rewards, right? All the practitioners who are in the room or the HR leaders would know, which is cash, benefits, and LTI, right? Which is ESOPs largely in startups. Most of the startups are largely not thoughtful about how do you actually balance between all of this, right? You can't be aggressive on all these three components and be paying heavy on benefits and heavy on cash compensation and heavy on equity. This is one of the biggest challenge in my, typically when I do any exercises on total rewards with any of the founders, I do a discovery conversation which is typically an hour and a half with the founders. If they don't give me time, I don't do those engagements. So that's my first meeting, yeah? So, and this is where most founders and most of the HR heads struggle answering me the question saying that, hey, what is that one of the component that I want to choose to be aggressive? Because there is always a pressure about what's happening in market. And some of the times I get answers saying that I want to be at the top 5 companies in cash, I want to be top 5 in equity, I also want to be top 5 in, I said, are you sure? Is it going to be sustainable, right? So question to be asked as practitioners in the room when such things come to you, what you're doing, is it sustainable on long run? Is it something that we can, if this organization has to last for 5 years, 6 years, whatever is the timeline, is this going to be working? Secondly, is it contextual to your company? And I used to talk about it 10 years back in the high-tech industry forums of where you know, high-tech companies used to copy, because if one of them, when I say high-tech, these are all tech product companies community, they'll end up copying because X companies rolled out a policy. Yeah? And we have seen those copying in startups also enough in the last 2 years. Especially during COVID time, everybody wants to do a lot of remote policies, remote related supports, etc. Right? And we have also seen some of them rolling that back, and employees are back in office to all of that. Why is that happening? Just think about it. When they did it, are they really being in a place to ask questions? How is it going to help us from a company point? Or are they being honest to say that, hey, this is an experiment we are going to run for next 1 year? Right? You can roll out policies and say, we don't know whether it's going to work out, but we're going to try this out for next 1 year. But when you promise an employee saying that, hey, you can work from XYZ location for the next whatever time period, then after 1 year you go back and tell them, no, this is not working, now we are changing, but you are already breaking a promise. But if you told them it's going to be an experiment that we're going to run for a year, it would have been a better promise to make to employee. So contextually doing this for the company, I think any time that you're doing rewards related policies, approaches, it's so important to think about it. I'll give you a very small example for this very early days of Flipkart. I don't know how many of you here know, Flipkart rolled out a maternity benefit program of 6 months leave in 2014. Government of India made it mandatory much later, yeah? But even before we rolled this out, one of the things that we did is we met with every woman employee who went through a maternity, cycle, asking them feedback about what do they expect an employer to support on. And the amount of input, Babu also used to be part of the same team, the amount of input that we got to design that policy, we didn't have to do anything. All the input for the policy design came from employees. Secondly, it is not just about rolling out a policy. Have you sensitized your managers? I think one of the questions I still remember one of the founders asked me is, I don't think this policy is going to work because my hiring managers will actually stop hiring women in the company, right? So we have to first do that sensitization workshop, onboard all the first line managers even before that policy get rolled out. So I think contextualizing it, looking at it, is it something sustainable for long term, whether you do on cash compensation, whether you do it on benefits, whether you do it on ESOP, I think that's very, very important, right? And from an overall talent landscape point, one of the things that in the room, especially people who are in the room will start facing, which you may have already, there are a lot of larger companies setting up their development centers in Bangalore and different cities in India and expect 100 more such companies to come over the next 12 to 18 months in India. And these are published by one of the big four, and they predict this to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. And this is very similar to what you would have seen in early 2008 or sometime, where a lot of call centers and all that got opened. Imagine that to be a lot of dev center getting opened, and the talent aspirations of these companies who are setting up dev center, not anymore looking at the services organizations and the talent from them. These companies are hiring from startups. And my organization itself, I placed about 80 plus people in the last 2 months from startups to these companies. Right? So I think that's another change that you will see. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. I have a follow-up question to that. As you said that you've placed 80 odd people, right, from startups to the not so cool companies, right? That means there is a shift that is happening and people are okay to leave wealth creation, and I'm sure they are not offering ESOPs, right? Or are they? If they are, how is that different then from the wealth creation opportunity, which may not be heard for a while now? Are you seeing that change already happening?
I think, large part of this hiring in these organizations would happen in the first 3 levels, level 1, 2, 3, and if you look at typical experience level of these folks would be somewhere around 2 years to max of about 8 years, right? And these organizations, for example, if they are setting up an engineering team here, the engineering manager will remain to be in the US or whichever location those companies are, and the engineers will be operating out of India. And that segment actually don't worry so much about ESOP. Yeah? And they are okay to move into these companies because cash compensations are met. There is also a lot of thinking about they going in looking is this business as profitable, and most of these companies are listed, right? So I think they're very comfortable to make a move because they know that next 3 years of my career or 4 years I can be here in this. Especially those who have had some bad experience with some of the last 1 or 2 years. I think I've seen a very high acceptance ratio on offer, in fact, on that segment than startups. I think currently in 2 or 3 clients that we're working with, they are at offer acceptance ratio of above 80%, which is unheard in startup, right? So I think that should give you some perspective about how this is evolving. Yeah.
Absolutely. And see, employee satisfaction with their compensation is again how they perceive the compensation to be, right? eventually, do you think it is the right time, Subeer, if I may ask this to you, do you think it is the right time for companies to start focusing on personalization of rewards? Do you think it makes more sense for an employee to choose what they want? And where are you in that journey? Or do you think that journey is still distant future and not something to be talked about right now?
So I think on this one we had a chance, all of us were talking about this, and I think we're not exactly to that question, but there was some calibration that we had the occasion to practice. Before I answer your question, I'll just say that there's this adage that compensation professionals believe, some of you may have heard it, that you're never happy with your compensation, no matter how it is. You're always happy, or you're always considering your compensation relative to others. So if you're making more than whatever peer basket you established for yourself, you're making more than that, you're happy. If it's less, you're unhappy. Doesn't matter if you're working for the world's best paying investment bank, or you've generated a lot of wealth in a startup, you've generated crores, but someone else has made more, you'll be unhappy. It's that perception thing that I think is part of our survival DNA, or it keeps us always benchmarking. And I don't think the problem will ever go away. But that brings about to the point that I think my co-panelists have been making about how do we manage those perceptions, how do we, and I think personalization will work for the super enlightened, or if it becomes a norm, then people will want to. But to a large extent, most people are not really bothered about, there's some people who are very particular, they'll open their payslip, the moment it comes, they'll check, they'll write to the payroll team or HR saying, why is this deduction, or why is this extra, they're finally calibrated on. And there are others who forget to file their income tax returns on time, they will not put in there. So you see the whole spectrum. The thing is that the emotions are built up only at the time of increments and checking with the others in your friend circle if you're from an engineering college. All of that happens. After that people forget about it. There's probably satisfaction, dissatisfaction. And personalization, something which could be seen as a new lever to show that companies are going a little further. But I am a bit of a skeptic to say, is it really worth it? But I may be completely outside what others or what the trend is going. So that's my take on it.
What's your take on this, Satish, on personalization of total rewards? I am sure this has been a very favorite topic of yours to speak on.
See, I think it's very important if organizations have already not started this journey to see what employee wants, right? Versus what you're giving. If it's not matching, I don't think the perceived fairness or how an employee see it is going to. And I probably don't agree completely with Subeer on one of the point about the comparison of people saying that if I get paid more than another person. I think where organizations miserably fail in most of my experiences is when the why is not explained. And most companies struggle in terms of explaining that why are you actually getting paid less than the other person, right? And I think I can ask this question probably to this group here. How many of your employers actually clearly explain, if I go to the last employee in the organization, last man in the hierarchy, and ask the question, you get paid so much, okay? Do you know how is your pay decided? Can I see the hands? How many of you are super confident the last man in the company will say, I know how my compensation is decided? Nobody? Yeah, I think that answers. Yeah. So I think it's so important to have that why explained from very, very early journey of, deciding this, right? See, and I've also seen companies go in all hands and declare saying that, hey, we give you an average increase of X percentage, Y percentage. Very bad idea when employees don't know how you decided average increases. So I think there is a journey of building reward philosophy, communicating it to employee, then to go back and tell in an all hands, okay, what have we done and how did we arrive at an increment? It took us 4.5 years to 5 years in Flipkart to go all in all hands and tell that, hey, what's an average increment look like? The 4.5 years journey was only about communications, only about building awareness, I think, which Romita was mentioning about in the beginning, right? So I think crossing the journey of building awareness, then getting into, sharing some of these numbers through communication is important. From a personalization point, it's very important that I get what I, for example, let's say in different stages of my life, I would prefer very different things. Let's say, early days of my life, I would probably say I need a lot of cash, not necessarily, long-term incentives and benefits. But I say, move forward and I have family, kids, etc. I think maybe I'll give a lot of importance to benefits in that stage of life. So people have preferences at the stage and time of their life. I think it's very important organization understands it and start approaching it based on that. I think the fairness quotient in organizations, in employees will go significantly higher if they are able to do personalization. It doesn't need to be necessarily to an individual level. Even if you are able to identify there are 100 employee company, 30 employees prefer heavy on benefits, 30 of them prefer on cash, 30 of them prefer on LTI. We have done this as an, at a 250 people in the top level in Flipkart. We used to do this very high level on what is their preference. Is it cash? Is it even at the time of hiring, right? So we always had this option A, option B offers, which many companies do today. But we also not just stop it at offer, we also carry it forward through the entire life cycle in the company. So I think it's very important for companies to start thinking about personalization.
Got it. But to that, you also mentioned about communicating this reward philosophy of yours to the last person, right? How do you do that? Romita also touched upon this aspect where she said ki you give an offer letter, you don't even know whether my candidate or my employee has even read it till the end, right? Do they even know what you are offering when you talk about benefits? Do the employees even value that? How do you get to that? Can you share some good practices? Because you have also led these exercises for many people, right? You have spoken to founders about that. You preach about that. Can you share some good practices around that?
Yeah, I think I'll give very simple examples. Again, how many of your offer letters today have an additional page which talk about your ESOP policy? Couple of hands, not bad. Yeah. So, and I think these are examples, right? There are now if I had to put this on a step, right, Anurag, the first step is always about clearly putting your reward philosophy, in a one-pager document or a two-pager document, however early your company is, even if it is 30 people company, right? It's very important to put that document, clearly call out what's the why, share it with all your leadership team, managers in the organization, answer as much as question they have, probably for the first 6 months to 1 year, do not publish it to employees. Make it very, very polished document that a manager is capable to answer this question tomorrow to an employee, right? This is first step. And never ever rush into this. Don't be desperate, I want to go communicate this to employee tomorrow. No, wait for a year. Let managers understand this better, first. Secondly, when you go to employee, pick up all the learnings that you have when you communicated this with the managers and leadership team, right? And never keep these communications as one way. Go to your leaders and managers with an understanding that I'm going to learn by communicating this to them. I will have enough question coming to them and I will incorporate this part of the program. Now when you go to employees, you cannot communicate the same document or the communication that you build for managers and leaders is not going to work for employees. You need much simpler version of that because for the reasons of their understanding about reward philosophy, they have not been a manager, they don't understand how this works in different companies, right? So I think small things, I remember when we did 2 minutes video, for example, when we just launched Flipkart's reward philosophy, and it was a super hit 2 minutes video that went around Flipkart that everybody started talking about, hey, this is how my comp is decided, this is how the reward philosophy is, right? Very powerful way of communicating. Secondly, when we launched a benefits program for Flipkart, there was I think it's still used, I've seen it very recently also, about a 6-pager document which very clearly talks about what are the principles of deciding these benefits. Benefits are not spoken first, right? And then talk about every benefits program so that an employee comes and joins your company, they are not going to come and ask you, okay, I have this X benefits in my past company, I want it here also. No question. We immediately tell them, can you actually run it through the principles? Does it put tick mark on all the principles that we decided? Only then that comes out, right? So there is no back and forth on it. So I think it is so much about contextualizing communication. I don't think I have a straightforward answer to say you should do ABC, but I think it's about contextualizing very specific to your company, what works, each one of you know. but important that you take this communication phase twice to ensure the last man understands this. That is when you go back and tell, hey, this is my average budget, this is the maximum increase to minimum increase. You can talk about all of that. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So my next question would be to Babu. Yes, around the same lines.
I'll probably extend his answer a bit. So there is also one more why or how you could do this, right? He spoke about communication at length. One of the challenges with reward professionals I have seen is that we operate in a little bit of silos or islands, right? We don't sort of co-create. Maybe we co-create, but implementation, we don't work with other arms of HR. One of the key in communication is you don't have to struggle so much. If you could start partnering with the other arms of HR, for example, personalized rewards we are talking about, right? There's one individual who joined the organization. We moved, he was located in the US, he was relocating to India, and we shipped his piano, right? That was the personalized first reward what we ever did. It took 8 months for the piano to reach. The moment it hit Indian shores, he was asked to go, so we shipped it back. That's a different story altogether. But this was done in conjunction with the HR business partner, with the rewards partner, and with the talent acquisition team. So if you start working very closely with them, it kind of gives you visibility on how you could personalize. You understand. So there is potential gold mines which are sitting within the organization from whom you could infer in terms of what's happening. Very recently in my current organization, we hired someone who is 56 years young, not old. So you need to make an ESOP policy. You have a policy which is standard 4-year vesting cycle, right? At 56, you give him 4-year vesting cycle, it's going to be 60. The standard retirement age is 58. He is a kick-ass sales guy. We know he is going to get us the next 2 billion. How do you structure this? Just go back and look at the environment. One of the interesting things which happens in Indonesia is the retirement age gets furthered 1 year once in every 3 years. Let me rephrase it. The government increases the retirement age by 1 year once in every 3 years. Right now the retirement age is 57 as per the government rules. It's going to become 58 in 3 years. Another 3 years it's going to become 59. So if you closely look at what's happening in the environment, that would help you to personalize the rewards. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you could start working very closely with other arms of the HR organization, that would give you more insights in terms of how you could personalize. It really works, at least at the leadership level. Taking it down to the last person, it's going to be a challenge.
Got it. So now we've been talking all about, how do we do this for the employees, make them feel good, all of that. But eventually when we have our appraisals coming, maybe in April, right? And so see, we ran this salary increment survey. Amongst the funded startups, 18% of our respondents said there are no increments for the year, right? Unacademy said there are no increments at all. We might use LTI to sort of compensate for that. When there are actually no increments happening, do you feel that there is a negative sentiment already? I'm talking about the startup ecosystem in general, right? In that negative sentiment, how do you still make the people feel good? And on an average, say, it may be 15% in tech last year. Do you see that going down significantly this year?
I don't see that going down because what we see in our organization is the increment numbers would be in double digits. I also talk to some of the people in the ecosystem. I don't think people are going to take down the increment budget. The founders may come back and tell you they don't have budget, but they do have money, right? So I'm sure the increments this time may not be announced or pronounced so widely, but there are increments which would happen in organizations for this year at least. I'm pretty sure about.
Got it. Romita, what do you have to say to that? Do you think it is going to be the same as that of last year? I'm not talking about specifically how will it happen in your organization, but in general, do you think we can paint the same picture this year, or do you think there will be something else?
I kind of agree with Babu that it's definitely. So there are a lot of speculations, there are a lot of talks, of course. I'm not saying things are absolutely exactly like last year. Answer is no. But at the same time, I think being authentic, being transparent, uh, be very open to the employees that what's going on in the company and what is driving your decision making. Bring the context of how the company is doing, talk with numbers, talk with a sense of purpose with the employee. I think that will really help you bind the team together and get them to take you where you want to be, right? So, and especially, uh, I think in the context of appraisal, reviews and increments, there are many companies, of course, which are still in the mode of wait and watch. Uh, there are very few companies who would actually go ahead and say that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? But I think there is a merit in doing that. The reason is if you are not doing anything and you're waiting and watching, I think the communication and the message that you are passing on to your employees and the team is that you don't want to take a risk, you don't want to take a plunge, you don't want to really be a first mover in taking decision. Whereas being a founder, being a leader, you need to do all this thing, right? Take a calculated risk, understand how the context looks like, look at your quarterly numbers. I think you have enough of data as a leader, as a founder to take these decisions. So it's a very natural thing for founders to wait and interact and understand, okay, there's founders group, of course, they will all interact with each other. But I think what's more important is taking a call, communicate very frequently with employees with what's going on. I think that has always worked for us. We always remained very open in terms of our numbers. How did we do? What are we not doing well? I think that's another important aspect which I think changes the entire game for employees, and they start putting a lot of credibility in the shoulders of the management, is when you start talking about what's not going good with the organization and start talking about what can fix it, right? What can address it? What is that you're looking from them? How is that they can add value to your journey? If you are transparent, if you're authentic, I think it's all there then in that case. Of course, things are different, things are challenging, a lot of people are still waiting and watching. But yes,
Subeer, do you
company
agree?
has to decide where, one has to decide where they want to be, whether they want to be a leader or they want to be a follower is a question that one has to answer.
We'll hear from a leader then. Subeer, do you think you agree to what Babu and Romita have said?
So I'm going to give you a perspective of my having done compensation consulting for 15 years of my life, okay? And that is, let's just go back to the points that they made, and I'm going to summarize it in what I had experienced through many companies. The only sustainable compensation position is 50th percentile. Anything that you're paying more is an investment. So you are in a new market, you want to take away talent from the competition, you go to a higher percentile. You are growing, you want to attract talent, you go to a higher percentile. But the moment you go to a higher percentile, you should also understand that you will pull up the median next year, because when your data goes back into the benchmark, what you were doing by 75th percentile has lifted the median from the last year. So you are making cost of talent more expensive every year. The situation that is current means that a lot of companies were paying extra money to compensate for a challenging culture maybe. They were paying extra because they didn't have a product market fit and they wanted the people to come and establish that. So many reasons. Now when, as Warren Buffett famously said it, and it's one of Warren Buffett's quote, but it's not something which is generally spoken in polite company, but he said, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. The tide has gone out. Now the companies that are able to hold on to their talent without having to pay them extra are the ones that are going to survive. Those who have authentic culture, those who have the ability to hold on to their talent, they are the ones who are going to make it. And so, you know, that's my take on this.
Got it. One more question to that. Now that there is no yardstick on which you can measure your talent strategy, right? The times have changed. You can very well say that whatever is happening right now is happening because of the macroeconomic conditions, right? And you may shift the blame. Now that there is no yardstick, how do you actually measure the success of your people policies?
that's a brilliant question, and I'll go back to what Satish and I were also talking about earlier. We will need benchmarks far more than in the past, because it's very important. You don't want to lose your, so it's in times of like these, companies will want to know who's their best talent and how much do they need to pay. And even if there are no increments that are done for, in a room full of comp professionals, we can say this, that companies do make exceptions for the star talent. They can't afford to let them go. So they do need that benchmark. The reason why I'm saying personalization may not be something which will, you will build those cafeteria approaches to benefits and so on. But beyond that, you want to make sure that everyone feels they're paid fairly. And that will come from benchmarks. And if you personalize too much, then those benchmarks, people start losing sight of those benchmarks. It becomes really confusing. So we are going to see more and more companies focused on ensuring, firstly, convinced themselves that they're doing the right thing, and then convincing their employees that they're paying them fairly in line with the market. Or if there's a gap from the market, why? Then they must know how much is the gap from the market and so on. So that's not going to change.
Got it. Got it. Fair. Anything to add here, Satish, Babu?
I think they covered. I think what Romita mentioned about, I think authenticity in communication is really, really key here. And the second point, again, she mentioned about if do you want to be leading or following is the second question you should ask. I think these are the only two things I would say that I'll just echo what she mentioned. I think if you are in a position as an organization at an, you have cash flow for X number of months to all of this, right? I think, Anurag, we were also talking about it the other day. I think it's important to be transparent even when you're hiring a person and say that, okay, my runway is for 30 months, 36 months, 40 months, whatever is that number, right? So that same transparency applies even when you're looking at a compensation increment. I think you should, if as a founder, for example, I run an organization of about 30 people. I've gone and told them already that don't expect a hike this year, right? I think that transparency, and there is a why explained, how does it help, all that has been explained, right? I think people love that transparency, and I think you just need to go out and say, whether you represent a founder or a get founder to do it, I think it's very, very important. I don't think, if you build a organization where culture is such that you're transparent about it, you share everything that you build, not just about compensation. You can't get up one fine day and go decide to be transparent on compensation, but you should have built that culture in general over a period of time to share everything that happens in business, your business metrics, to all of that, right? Yeah, I don't want to kind of name. There is a company that I know, a global one, which built from India. I think from day one, they've been transparent, including sharing the revenue numbers to everybody in the company. The company went through one of the most difficult times that any startup in India could go through, and came back very, very powerfully, doing really, really well. And I think those are many examples that we have. If you talk to people around, you can find. I think it's do you want to be that transparent organization or a choice that it's come from top, it starts from founder? I think as HR people, you should be challenging why you wouldn't want to do it if somebody is not doing it. I think that's the right. And this whole wait and watch approach, I'm not a big fan of at all, right? I think it's very important to take calls, take decisions, because your employees are evaluating. Because I'll give you again very simple examples there of when I happen to talk to a lot of candidates, because we are in that business of recruiting, right? So candidates today evaluate companies on the speed of decision making. When they go through the process, if your company is taking X number of days after the final interview to decide whether you're a hire or not, I have candidates who declined the offer saying that they took 5 days to come back and tell me whether I'm a select or not. If that's how the decision making happens in this company, I don't want to join this company, right? So I think it's very important on some of these elements. I think that's how I'll summarize it.
Got it. So now we are a room full of reward enthusiasts and professionals. Can we speak a little about the best practices around how do we utilize the resources around us to make more meaningful compensation decisions, right? How do we utilize those resources to sort of arrive at those best decisions? Because eventually that is how our compensation culture will be shaped, whether communicated or not, but at least how they should build on that. We can start with Babu.
The simple way is keep looking at the market, what's happening in the market. Don't just read through what happens in rewards conferences, including this one, right? So if you can just keep looking at what's happening in the market, I can give you a simple example here. What's happening in Southeast Asia, specifically Indonesia, is they're changing the capital, right? Something unheard of, which we have seen only in history books. And that's a 10-year horizon, what the country has decided to do. Now, when you move something like that, like you've experienced moving homes, we have experienced moving offices, but they're moving capital, right? So when we move something like that, what are the macroeconomic changes which happen with this change? Number one, they need to ensure that every industry which is located in the current geography should move to the new geography also. If that shift need to happen, there's going to be a lot of benefits which will be given to the existing industry, like tax-free havens and so on and so forth. If that's going to happen, there's going to be dominance of these industries in the market for the next 10 to 15 years time frame. Now that is the shift what we have realized 3 to 4 months back when we heard the announcement from the government. What we realized that the talent what we used to attract from banking and retail segment is no longer available for us, at least for the next 3 to 4 years time frame, because those industries are hugely benefiting by this shift. Where do we go for talent? Should we look at a different geography? Should we look at somewhere plus or minus 1 hour in GMT time with our current location, maybe go to Eastern Europe, maybe go to other countries in Southeast Asia and start attracting talent? This is one way of looking at what we could learn, how we could change, what inputs we could get from market. So I would strongly recommend, if you start looking at market forces and what changes are happening, that's one place where you can start learning. The second place I would recommend is, there's a poor soul called talent acquisition person in each and every one of your organization. Spend some time with him or her. They will tell you what's happening. They will tell you, I mean, if you talk to Satish, he'll tell you, he spoke about the trends, what you see in the last 2 months, about 80 plus offers being accepted. The acceptance rate is very high, startup acceptance rate, it's very low. All of this insight, there's one person sitting in your organization who can give you. Gather that insight, it will tell you about the trends which are happening at the micro level, right? So there are multiple places where you can start networking. Keep attending conferences like this, but also talk to these individuals in your own organization where you can understand and grasp about what's happening. The third place I would point out is, I learn immensely from Twitter, right? Twitter tells you all the trends 3 months in advance. A trend which comes up and dies also, right? There are many things. But that's one place where you can quickly learn about what is the upcoming trend. Be deep into it. If you could spend at least 20, 30 minutes, make that as your only social media place to go. Difficult, but try. If you could try that, that's another place for you to learn. These are places I generally go. I also see that some reward professionals go there and gather information, apart from all the regular places which is available for you to understand what's happening in the market.
Anything to add, Romita, Subeer, Satish? Yeah?
I think he summarized for all of us, because I'll actually double down on the point that you made about recruiters. Recruiters get advance notice. You know, they're talking to so many candidates, they're talking to agencies who are talking to so many other candidates. So, you know, the insights that they have are leading insights. They're not very reliable, but if you talk to 10, you do get a sense of which way things are going, which you can then validate through, you know, the reliable compensation data, which is a lag indicator. But you know, not talking enough to recruiters is probably one of the things that a lot of comp professionals end up doing, which I think should change. So, but nothing further to add. I can't think of. I was struggling when he was thinking. I was saying, what else could be added? What else is a resource? No, but I think he's covered it.
Got it, great. So I think we're almost time. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay. No? Okay, sure.
Hi. So I have a question for the panel. Like people like me who are joining startups nowadays, and they are given ESOPs in maybe instead of more salary. So, I mean, there are few factors which some questions they know about and they want to know, and some questions they don't even know about until that situation comes. So like three of them is, one is what is the value of these ESOPs when company will raise maybe A series, or when it will do an IPO, it will become a unicorn. Then second question is maybe many people don't even know about them, is key what is the exercising price and what is the exercising period. So these questions come to at least my mind, ki how good job startups are doing nowadays to communicate these things, and what is the best practices startups can adopt in these direction.
So I think it's again, I'll go back to the same point of being transparent about some of these points. I think most of the ESOP plans are, I've seen when people ask questions is when they will start searching for it, and even the HR people itself will start looking for it and start asking questions around where is my ESOP plan document, right? I think it's very important at the time of hiring itself, you could simply send out an FAQ document to a candidate in advance. Why do you want somebody to ask you questions? Let's be proactive. Let's send out the questions, which every questions that you heard from all the candidates in the past, including what you heard within the company. The FAQ should also be not a static document. Keep it dynamic. As more questions come in, please keep adding to it. Please make a lengthier one. I think a simple FAQ can address all of these questions that come from a prospective hire, right? And this is very, very early days on every company that I advise. I tell them, I actually make and give them that FAQ, because most of the places the questions will be same, the answers will differ based on the ESOP plan of the company, right? So I think that's an easier way to do it. I was also thinking from the previous question, right? It's all about, if you look at, you can summarize a lot of this we spoke about in 3 C's, okay? Collaborate, which Babu spoke about. Collaboration can include both within and outside of the organization to get everything that you can learn about, right? Including the networking to all that. Second is contextualize, right? Third is communicate. So even in this question of yours, if you can bring all of that, questions that people have in a collaborative way, including HRBP, talent acquisition, and outside, and contextualize it for your organization, communicate it to people. I think that's how I summarize it. Was there a second question you had?
So my question was around exercising period or exercising price of ESOPs. For example, let's say if I'm leaving the organization and they give me a duration of 3 months to exercise my stocks. So is this a good policy? Because now I have to purchase them, and
Understood.
I don't know where the company is going, but I have to pay real money and I have to pay taxes.
I got the question. I think, see, this is, these are practices that as, practitioners who sit in the room, I think you should start questioning whoever drafted those policies. I think anything that you're going to enforce into an employee, I think it's a bad practice. Give choices, right? If there is a 3 months window to exercise, if that is a choice, it's fine. Give both the options. Maybe keep it open for 3 months or for whenever they wanted to do exercise, right? Anything that you enforce in process of, in the name of policy, I think whether it's ESOP or anything else, I think that's not going to work in any organization. But if you put broad guidelines and if you give options, I think that's going to work. And there are ways to draft this, and I've seen more than 60 to 70% of the companies that I interact with have this policy of 3 months period to exercise. I would say it's not very employee friendly at all.
Hello everyone. So my question is, and the question is because I heard a lot of things around educating, communicating and explaining reward philosophy and benefits to the employees. So my question is to all of you, what are some of the best practices on how you educate and communicate the reward philosophy, provided couple of things there, you have to make a balance between transparency and confidentiality. if you are aware about a company that is making best in terms of communicating and ensuring that employees are well aware about the policies, maybe talking about a fest kind of setup, or a week focused on that. So are you aware about something?
So you're talking about communicating, right? Yeah. You want a long answer or a short answer? What? Short answer, ChatGPT. Right? It's useful. It's very helpful. Use ChatGPT and use Grammarly so that you can change the language, right? See, it depends on how do you want to communicate. One of the simplest ways we do is you take the opposite table and you be the listener. What is that you would like to hear about the policies, what you have drafted? Make it very simple. Ensure that there is no question which comes back to you, right? Simple basic principle, right? If you are the listener, what doubts you have, how do you solve for it? And ensure there is no coming back. That's second. 3, I would say that don't use the phrase, I will come back to you, right? That tells everyone that you are not a decision maker. Please be sure that you are very crisp, concise, and you are explaining it to yourself. If that is something you could bring in, don't worry about adding in all the languages, bringing in every complexity into what you are trying to explain. Keep it straight and simple. What works for you, as if you are explaining to yourself, will definitely work for the organization. Very simple, right? So there are multiple strategies which are floating around. You could look at, he spoke about collaboration. You could look at attaching an FAQ while you are communicating at the beginning. You could bring in all the best practices which are available. Whatever you want to communicate, just keep it simple. Ensure that you are explaining it to yourself. It becomes much, much more easier. Don't try to copy paste from anywhere else. That doesn't help. Create it on your own. Be very good. There are numerous tools which can help us to correct whatever challenges we have. We can get in good phrases. We can communicate. Don't worry about that. So that's one of the biggest challenge, right? When we articulate and communicate, is it being understood by the person who is receiving it? Solve for it, then it becomes much more easier. I know I have not told you how to communicate and what to communicate. I understand that, but it's very simple.
I'll just add on what just Babu said. So I'll talk about what I have seen has worked and it's practically implemented. So I'll talk about that. So one way to do it is, it's not about just generating a total reward statement and sending this out as an email to the employee. I don't think so. When I meant communication and being transparent, I don't mean that you just send out a reward statement. The idea here is to spend enough and more time with your employees in educating them. Now, you can easily do this by practical approaches. So one way to do it is you decide a cohort of people who have similar sense of understanding about your reward strategy or similar set of questions that they may ask, right? You can do it basis any sort of demographics, and then the way we did, I'll talk about that. So the way we did it is very simple. We hosted an open webinar with everyone. Like in this open webinar, our idea was to just go talk about the reward strategy, talk about your long-term incentive plan. Plenty of questions around how does RSU work, how ESOPs work, how is it going to help me create wealth. Tell me about some simulation. Tell me about how market evaluations happen, how valuations are decided. So many questions that people do not even ask because we don't give them any forums to ask these questions. So open up forums. You may not have answers to everything that they're going to ask you. Believe me, you don't have answers to everything. So don't try to perfect yourself by cooking up some answers over the session. Wherever you see you do not have an answer, take that, of course, I'll say, and then get back to them as soon as possible with the right response. So the way we have done is, we have actually created an FAQ document. We don't overkill our approaches with PPTs and all, so we don't get into all that. Very simple approach. Create a simple Word document, write all the questions, write all the answers to it, okay? And keep this document very, very dynamic, very dynamic. And this should be open document accessible to everyone in the company. That's the most simple piece we have done, and anyone who comes, gets on board, gets a set of rewards and benefits, should have an access to this page. Then of course, education to your manager is equally important. You cannot expect the employee to keep coming back to you or HRBP or for that matter your comms specialist every time. The bandwidth will not support. So you need to have your managers totally enabled to handle some of these basic level fundamental questions. Third, keep your eyes, ears open every time because your people will give you feedback. For us, the source of information for any new policies, any new program, it's the voice of the employee. Like what we hear is what we interpret, we slice and dice and we decide, okay, this is the problem statement, this is the root cause of it, we are going to address this. Not everything can be addressed, so it's okay. Let's not try to be over perfect in everything, but this is what I've seen practically working for us. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but this is practically something that we have implemented and it worked for us.
Question coming in from me. First of all, thank you so much. It was a really enlightening session. A lot of inputs that we can take back. Thank you. You guys spoke about cash benefits, long-term plans, right? It's pretty standard. But since you guys have seen multiple startups, evaluated different scenarios, if you can just give us some kind of a framework that you kind of keep in mind, wherein in these kind of frameworks, these kind of environments, this kind of employee size base, cash can take predominance over the other two offerings or something like that. That kind of gives us a direction to focus as we build our plans.
Subeer?
Okay. So, in terms of the approaches of how you flex, what I'm understanding from your question is how can you flex your compensation approach based on what's your stage of growth, what's the expectations from your potential employees, new hires, and how do you marry that to whatever is your organization strategy, HR strategy. I'm understanding saying what are the tools that are available. Is that the question?
True. And also, I mean, there's another stakeholder in play as well, right? So you have, say, an investor pool or an investor community. So if it's a investor with a private equity background, he's thinking exit. Whereas if you have someone else who's coming with a different mindset, they have different priorities in play.
Yeah. So I'm going to attempt an answer because it's very contextual. So I'll try and approach this in a broad frame, and I'll explain the rationale for where I'm sharing what I'm saying. So let's take, say, to your point about the investor who wants, let's take, say, some investor wants to say, I want to see you scale very quickly because you're the first mover in this market. I don't want you to wait for profits because if you take pole position, then you will not, you'll learn much faster than the others. So don't wait for, spend, burn cash, but get the best talent and scale to make sure that you're the largest market shareholder. And if this startup's funded that way, with that philosophy, then you really will want to throw everything that's in it except equity. You'll use more cash than equity. Let's take, say, you're a mid-sized startup. I mean, you're the sort of startup that can afford HR, dedicated HR people. That means you're no longer the 15, 20-person startup. You do have some systems. Your investor probably expects that you set up internal systems of governance and control. So if you reach that stage, then you'll start developing HR plans. For example, you'll say, for most of my roles, I will do a build talent approach. The founding batch that comes in will grow. I will hire strategically for skill gaps. Suddenly a new technologies, chat GPTs come up. So all of a sudden, the Web3 specialists are converting to AI specialists. And now we need to hire AI specialists. So we will hire those strategic skills, but otherwise we'll grow talent from within. If you're growing talent from within, you'll have to have internal job postings. If you'll have internal job postings, your pay transparency will have, you will share saying, if you move from this role to that role, you'll get paid so much. So the information circulates far more easily in the organization to say what are the. So then pay transparency becomes an important aspect, which means to say your cash will have to become stable. Your equity will be something that you'll have to justify. So your tools will be far more, and then what time you got in, what equity you got, what's the money or resources you're going to spend in communicating that, all starts becoming a little more complicated. One thing that I can tell you as a trend is nobody's using variable pay. Okay, let me put caveats to that. People are struggling to bring in variable pay, and it's not something which I don't see that changing anytime soon, and we can have the perspectives of others on the table. So one important lever which the old economy companies have been using to manage cash flow is lost to most startups, and that is quite a hobbling feature. The other thing is that even retirement benefits, for example, on communication, some of the older economy companies, what they say is they talk about the compounding effect of, let's take say PF, saying you're thinking you're losing PF, but you're contributing nothing to your retirement. And this is a loss argument. But some companies have started making a gain argument to say that after 15 years, your PF calculator will say this is what your PF will be, and this is what a 8% will look on a compounding value. And when they look at that, they say, yes, I want VPF, I want to contribute more. So, those approaches and all that are something which I've seen startups are not able to do because the focus on cash, the competitiveness of the sector has deprived them of those opportunities. So, you agree, assessment?
Thank you so much, Subeer. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. That was very interesting. Lots of interesting questions and
Lizelle, we have
dialogues.
just one more question if you can
One
take
more
one.
question?
Yeah,
All right, go ahead.
this is Ravi. So last year, most of the benchmarks have gone up, right? I mean, because of the market scenario, things were rosy. Now, if at all, like we need to downgrade the benchmarks, the bigger problem statement there is my top performers will be sitting in the top quartile of the benchmarks. Now, if I downgrade the benchmarks, literally they won't be getting any hike for next 1.5 year. What is the best way to handle when we correct the benchmarks downwards?
Very interesting. Who's taking this?
I'm not sure from a point of benchmark downwards. I think either it will stay at a point where it is, because you're not going to change your median salary downwards, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Yeah, possible. I mean, based on the current trends, like we might have to keep it at the same place, or if at all, like we need to correct the median also, like we'll have to do it, right?
Yeah. So I think again it's about transparency there. Yeah. If you made a mistake of hiring people at top quartile based on what's happening in the market, yeah, I think it's very, very important to go back and tell them transparently you sit at X percentile or you are at top quartile of our compensation range. Hence, increments are minimal or nil, whatever is that communication. Yeah. Now the other set of people who are below the median or any of that segment, right? There you're going to, I'm assuming there's going to be a correction. Now, how do you bring this increases? There is a very traditional approaches of rating correlates to increased percentages will not work in this context, right? It has to be where is the compa ratio and where each one of them are placed, plus the if you're using rating as a parameter, rating or potential as a parameter, whichever is that one you're using, right? Then you look at in combination of that to really arrive at that number and communicate about it. Yeah, I can talk in detail about it. This is one of my favorite topic also in terms of driving this communication. There is a time in one of my past organization where we need to go and tell the top leaders in the company saying that, hey, all of you are at above 90th percentile of the market, right? None of you are going to get increment this year. We driven that communication, not just drive the communication. End of the review process, we also ran a survey to check how many of them actually will score on fair pay question. That we asked a question, do you feel you've paid fairly for the work that you do? 80% of employees in a company of 6,000 people have favorably responded saying that, hey, I'm paid fairly for the work that I do. So communication and rewards is the most powerful tool, the most powerful tool. How transparent and how well you can drive this communication before implementing it will determine how it's going to be successful to drive. And I think Subeer briefly mentioned about it. I think most of us live in the world thinking that one of the top drivers is compensation for people to stay in the company or choose jobs, etc. Right? I also built this framework on employee NPS, which is being built today by X to 10X. It was used by about 250 plus startups. This was actually built in Flipkart over a period of 5-6 years. Yeah. So And when we did correlation at a statistical model to see that what's the correlation between compensation and people's recommending a company as a promoter, right, as in an NPS framework. Compensation was in the 7th position, not in the top 6 reasons, right? The top 6 reasons were meaningful work in Flipkart context was always on the top, number 1. Then culture, communication, there are a bunch of things which tops on the list than compensation, right? So how do you drive this communication? Like I said, I can post this conversation if you need. I can stepwise give you this, how you can drive this. It's very easy to do it.
Sure, sure. We'll catch up after that.
One more question.
Yeah, it's very topical, the last thing you said about the 7th being compensation. In a room full of, maybe mistakenly saying this, but right-brained analytical functional specialists and others, that's why we are here. I'm curious, was it just a flavor of the month in terms of PTO, time off, vacation, remote work? Is that gone anymore? Is there any way to monetize this? What are you seeing? What are your experiences, benchmarks? Because in the 3 cash benefits incentives, there seems to be, unless I'm reading this wrong, there seems to be a hole in where to place that, all of that stuff. Has that disappeared from the market?
I don't think I got your question. If
Disappeared, you're saying time off or
I mean the whole, it's maybe, I don't consider this, I'm not saying this is a hot take, right? We're speaking so much about cash benefits incentives. Like, how do I as a compensation or as an HR person communicate and educate that, you know, there is something beyond that, that top 6 and 7th is compensation, which is the time off possibilities or the culture. From a offer or a internal benefits scenario.
So there was a category called employee, I think it's practices or something, which a lot of this, what you talk about, was in the top of 5, right? The work environment, meaningful work, I remember, was the top one. Babu, do you remember the balance of it? I think a lot of, yeah, I think ownership around what they get in the workplace was another piece for Flipkart. So it's very contextual to different companies, but I've also run this for 8 other unicorns when I was at X to 10X, and I can tell you the trend was very similar. May not be 7th, but was at 5th and 6th. And again, the reasons were very different on the top 4. But the common one that I've seen is meaningful work.
I'd like to add to this, okay? Sorry, you were finished, right? So I was just trying to economize on time. And this story is one of my favorite stories. I've shared this with a lot of people. But there was a time around 2001. Anyone here has heard of a company called Microland? Yeah. Has anyone worked there? You worked in Microland? I'm very, very happy to. So I'm going to say something very positive about your former company. So this was when Accenture had come to town. Accenture was at that point, you know, Accenture probably is paying as much as any of the other IT services companies now, the MNC IT companies. But when it came to town, Accenture was the biggest paymaster. It was pulling the smartest talent, the best talent from every other company. And I used to be with Cognizant. And someday we were talking and, you know, we compared notes. We said it is nearly impossible to pull anyone from Microland, even though the salaries are probably half or less of what any one of these companies could afford. And that to me is the point that you're asking. Just like there's no value for training effectiveness. Our colleagues in training are struggling to monetize or, you know, somehow measure what's the value of training or, you know, does training effectiveness get measured. Similarly, there are intangibles that we as compensation professionals know, but we can't monetize, and that is this. Your company culture, your managers, your values, they do lead some employees to hold on beyond the compensation that you offer to them. To the question that was asked earlier by the gentleman about someone at the top quartile, someone who joined you for money will give you a lot of pain when you say there are going to be no increases. That person will possibly also leave. But if that person didn't negotiate with you while coming in, is really top talent, but is not looking to work for money, then, you know, you could be authentic. And I'm just striking a slightly more nuanced note than what my co-panelists were talking about. Yes, you will communicate with them authentically, but some people, based on their personality, expectations, will still do what they want. But most people, and it's an intangible that you can't measure, will do what you think is right. They'll respond to your right actions and motions. That's
And I'll just add on one interesting number to this. Okay, when we ran this for about 15,000 employees, we picked up all the people who are paid above the median of comp and below the median of the comp, just to look at who is more happy. Any guesses? The people who are paid below median were happy. And the scores on NPSs to everything were pulled down in organization by people who paid above the median, because there is more expectation to get more than what they already are sitting at. And this is tested around 8 fairly big organizations, about 500 plus people.
All right, thank you so much for that, panelists. I wish we could take more questions, but we're running out of time. But you can meet them later on and maybe ask your questions personally as well. But as the gentleman rightly said in the front, this was very engaging and enlightening, and I'm sure the audience loved it as well. We now have the most important part of this whole event, which is the launch of the first and only real-time compensation benchmarking data access for funded startups. And for that, I would like to call upon Anshul Mishra, the co-founder of HireSure, on the dais. Please welcome him with a warm applause.
Thanks, Lizard. So I will just take you through the journey so far that has happened. And I think Anurag very rightly mentioned that we kind of, when we started, we were looking at like 60 companies. If they would participate, that would be great. We were really, glad to see the responses. Kind of saw that this is something which is actually very important and needed for people to see the data more real time, more relevant, find the companies which are very, very similar to them in terms of talents and all. And that is what we got as a feedback. And it has been a great journey so far. So I will, So I'll just tell you where we are at currently. So we have like 214 companies who have participated. These are like funded startups from India, very relevant to every other participants that are part of it. We have close to 103 companies whose data have been leveled, more than 60,000 data points, 51 unique job families, all across, I would say, more than 300 levels uniquely in different families and all. And I think that this calls for a validation that this is something which was actually needed. So if we can... Yeah, so this is a split of the companies that we could see. Like we have a decent participation from different stages as well. We have a good representation across the startup ecosystem that we have, both in terms of the funding stages as well as the valuation. And we also have a very decent representation across industry. And it will genuinely be great to see very similar companies being a part of this network. These are the companies which will give confidence for the participants and the consumer when they are looking at this data set, that it is the similar information that they are consuming. So I think in benchmarking, one of the most important aspects is that you get to benchmark yourself with the companies which are very similar. So that is something that we have tried. Talking about how to use this in the future, we are planning to allocate everyone a customer success manager who can help you understand more of this data. You will get an access to this dashboard starting from tomorrow. You can consume this data, tailor it to your requirement. It's a live data for everyone, and that is something that we have kind of highlighted. We'll keep on adding new filters, new insights as this grows. We want to change it more from existing compliance practice, some organization using compensation benchmark as a compliance practice, to rather more of a strategic practice where they can take that information and actually drive that decision directly from the market. So in case if there's someone who feel that they have missed the bus, I have 3 points to mention to them. that this is not an annual report. This is not annual, first of all. And secondly, this is not a report. It's a continuous product. It will be live. You will see new companies getting added. You will see change in data based on how appraisals would have happened, how new offers would have come in. And thirdly, I know it's a bit of cliche, but it's not a bus, it's a rocket ship. And hopefully, if there is a good feedback coming in from you, we are going to reach 800 starters by this year end. So that is more in terms of the compensation benchmarking report that we are launching today. Also, I just want to end with a small 2-minute teaser on something that we have been working, and it would be great for you to have a look at it and probably connect later and share insights on that as well. That's the kind of surprise that we want to present.
Just when you think you're done, you end up sharing the wrong spreadsheet with the wrong person, and you feel like destroying the whole world just to escape your suffering. We've been there, which is why we created COPUP, because no one ever said, I love wasting hours and hours managing hundreds of spreadsheets. COPUP is like a gentle breeze on the beach. It's like 100 puppies running towards you. It's like a campfire light under the stars. It's like... Okay, let's not get carried away. COPUP is the ultimate solution for data-driven compensation planning. Create internal salary bands using in-human data, offer data, and market data. With a click of a button, run multiple appraisal simulations and see their impact on your budget. Manage your appraisal cycle seamlessly with multi-level access and a global walkthrough to the hiring manager, CMB team, finance team, and then CEO with restricted access control. All under one roof. Because you deserve better. You deserve a seamless and relaxing experience like a boat ride in backwaters or a walk through lush green meadows or like... Okay, we should stop.
All right, we hope you enjoyed that teaser. Just to end this and wrap this up, once again, I'd like to thank our panelists, Subeer, Satish, Romita, and Babu for sharing their personal insights with us, and for the audience for being so engaging throughout this whole event. Now that the formal part is done, it's time for us to network and connect with each other. So please, stay with us for dinner. We start at 8 p.m. sharp. And yeah, it was lovely having you all here. Thanks for making the time once again, and have a great day. Thank you.